of an organization called Al-Qaeda. Like 99% of all Muslims around the world had never heard of such an organization. And of Osama bin Laden I had only heard a few weeks before. So it was clear to me that no matter what was the motivation, it must have been a very strong motivation, because which young man is ready to sacrifice his life for nothing? And it was also clear from the beginning that the targets chosen were of such high symbolic nature that there was a very clear plan behind it. The next stage, which began a few days later, was the stage of fear that the prediction of Professor Samuel Huntington that we were running towards a clash of civilizations might happen right under our noses in America and in Europe as well. As a matter of fact, there were hundreds of incidents where Muslim institutions and individual Muslims and non-Muslims who looked like Muslims were physically attacked in the United States. The United States government, as a matter of fact, rounded up 21 people with the name Bin Laden living in the United States because their life was threatened. They could not be guaranteed. They were evacuated from the United States simply because their name, their last name, happens to be Bin Laden. It had come to that point. Almost hysterical.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
And under the impression of an imminent danger of civil unrest, we then saw President Bush going for the first time in his life to a mosque, to the Central Mosque in Washington. And we saw Prime Minister Tony Blair waving a Quran on television and saying what a beautiful book that is, that he read. And we saw a German Chancellor, Schröder, inviting all of a sudden and for the first time ever the leaders of the German Muslim community to Berlin to talk with them. And we thought, tiens, we don't know who did what happened in New York and Washington, but we know that Islam somehow has profited from the fallout. Indeed, the demand for books on Islam rose dramatically. Quran translations were sold 1,000% above average in America and in Europe. 1,000%. All of my books had one or two additional editions after 11 September. I didn't have time to correct mistakes. It simply was printed to be on the market as fast as possible. We had a day of the open mosque in Germany, like every year, on 3 October last year. And instead of 40,000 people, 200,000 people came. The Central Council of Muslims in Germany has a website, www.islam.de for Deutschland, Germany. After 11 September, there were 400,000 visitors a day to that website. And still we have 1 million a month after 5 months. So that was a period where the Muslims thought perhaps the world has understood that Islam is a religion and not an ideology and not a school for the training of terrorists. But then it turned out that this additional interest was mainly based on anxiety and on fear. Now, as an old media man, I am conscious of the fact that good news is no news whatsoever, and that bad news is good news, because it is better to be known badly than not at all. In that sense, we should be happy that fear of what Islam might be and might do have possibly enormously increased real knowledge about Islam. At any rate, it seems that many people in the West, for the first time ever, have looked at their Muslim neighbors as people with whom they will have to live, who are here to stay, who are not just transit passengers, who are not just folkloristic images, but real people. And we had wonderful signs of support and solidarity from non-Muslims, from Catholic and Protestant clergy, people going out of their way to assure the Muslims that people know how to distinguish between a deviant, a criminal, a terrorist, and a Muslim. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of Ramadan, I attended an iftar dinner given by the Islamic Society of the State of Hessen in Frankfurt. And there the local Lutheran bishop talked about the holy language of the Quran, about how he admired that language and how he deplored that he was too old to really master Arabic so he could read the holy book of the Quran himself in the original language. Such a thing we had never heard before from a Lutheran bishop. Now that sounds quite optimistic. But then we passed into a new phase. And that phase was that now, one could say, with the perfectionism for which America, not only the Germans, also the Americans are famous, the hunting down of potential terrorists began. And this so-called war on terrorism has produced side effects that are really frightening. Older Americans remember what happened to Japanese Americans at the beginning of World War II, after Pearl Harbor. Older Americans also remember what happened during the McCarthy era. I remember how it felt when I, as a 14-year-old boy, was considered a dangerous animal and a potential terrorist, of course, simply for having been born and raised in Germany during the war. And now the Muslims are in danger of being discriminated as a community, and the methods of doing that I don't think are compatible with the self-image of America as a state which is under the rule of law. secret evidence is being applied, which is something that has never existed in any other country in the world. Computerized scanning is now being applied if you happen to be Arab speaking, studying natural sciences, if you don't go too often to the mosque, and if you are very law-abiding, in that case, you are a top suspect. Because to be law-abiding means you might be a sleeper. Not to be a very active Muslim might mean you are simply pretending not to be a good Muslim. You see the absurdity of this generalized suspicion if it is being